Hey guys, this is Colin from Blackjack Apprenticeship. I recently recorded and added to our paid video course an entire section dedicated to bet spreads and bankroll management. And I'm not going to share that entire thing with you guys here on YouTube, but I thought I would share one of those videos with you now, which is kind of an intro to understanding bet spreads and some of the implications you're going to need to know to effectively be betting and having a winning game in the casino. Here you go. All right, let's dive into understanding bet spreads. So one of the most misunderstood things out there about card counting is just figuring out your bet spread. And, I can give you a chart for basic strategy. There's a chart for deviations and, high-low can show you all that stuff. Betting is more complex because there's a lot of variables. But what I want to do is try to help give you a high-level overview and understand some of the important things you're going to need to know to really understand betting and bet spreads. The first is just the most basic sense of the goal of a bet spread. The goal of a bet spread is to bet less when the casino has the advantage, and to bet more when we have the advantage. If you had an infinite bankroll, you would bet as little as humanly possible when the casino had the advantage and as much as humanly possible when you have the advantage, and just let all the math work out. But none of us has an infinite bankroll, so we have to come up with a bet spread that fits for our bankroll. But before we get to that, let's just talk about, well, when do we gain the edge? When are we going to start betting more because we have the advantage? And this is what I call the glorious true one. So we sit down at a blackjack table, where we start back counting a blackjack table, and we count plus and minus, and we wait, and we're waiting for this glorious true one to occur, because it's in this range that we start to get the advantage, where everything that we're here for, it becomes profitable. Unfortunately, it's not quite as simple as exactly at a true one that we gain the advantage. It really depends on the rules. But for an example, in a S17 game with decent rules, you might gain the advantage below a true one. For an H17 game with not that good of rules, you might want to wait for true 1.5 to raise your bet, but it's around a true one. And we've got our house edge calculator that will help you out. And of course, betting software will help you figure out really if and when you should raise your bet right at a true one. But that's the range at which the edge changes from the casino to the player. So do we just throw our entire bankroll out there once we get to the glorious true one? No, we can't afford to do that. Remember, we start to get the advantage around a true one. And if you can remember, our advantage goes up by about 0.5% per true count starting at true one. So the higher the true count, the more we can afford to bet, but we still need to bet in proportion to how much of an advantage we have and how big our bankroll actually is. All right, let's take a few minutes and talk about betting units. You've probably heard this said on forums or on the internet. Well, how many betting units do you have? How many betting units is your bankroll? And what this means is, let's say you have a $10,000 bankroll and you were to bet in $10 increments. Well, you would have 1,000 betting units. 1,000 $10 betting units makes $10,000. Talking in terms of betting units can be a really easy way to discuss your bet spread and your bankroll size. So let's say that you're betting $10 increments and you're betting from $10 up to $100. Well, we would call that a 1 to 10 bet spread, because your top bet of $100 is 10 times your initial bet of $10. Well, if I'm betting from $100 to $1,000, I'm also using a 1 to 10 bet spread. It's just with a larger betting unit, $100 betting unit rather than a $10 betting unit. And a lot of the predetermined bet spreads that we have in our bankroll management app are based on this kind of idea of betting units, not because it's like the only way to bet, but it's kind of an easy way to understand, and it's an easy way to figure out very kind of effective betting units, whether you use a 1 to 6, 1 to 8, 1 to 10, 1 to 12, 1 to 20 betting unit. The point isn't to have a certain bet spread of 1 to 6 or 1 to 20. The point is to maximize EV and minimize risk. But a lot of these bet spreads are going to help you figure out, okay, if I bet like this, this is what it's going to look like for my bankroll and for the games that I'm playing. Here's a handful of just general considerations on the idea of bet spreads and betting units. The first is, don't get too hung up on the idea of betting units. Our goal is to maximize EV, minimize risk. And betting units aren't this magic formula for doing that. It can be an easy way to say, well, how big of a bet spread am I using? Am I using, 1 to 10, 1 to 20 unit bet spread? It can also be an easy way to say, like, hey, I lost 25 units last night, and communicate like, oh, it was really bad. But you don't have to give a dollar amount, because it's one thing if you lose 25 units with a $1,000 betting unit. It's another to lose 25 betting units with a $5 unit. But beyond that, it's really not that helpful to think in terms of betting units. Really, the goal of a card counter is to maximize EV, minimize risk, and get to the long run. All your bet spread is geared towards is accomplishing those three goals. So the first of those is going to be maximizing EV. So as far as maximizing EV, the bigger bet spread you use, the more EV you can generate. You know, there were times on the church team where we would go from $5 to 7 spots of $200, or from $25 to all 7 spots of $500. We had some people, when we had even larger bankroll, that would go from 1 spot of $50 or $100 to all 7 spots of $1,000. Those are massive bet spreads because we didn't think in terms of units. We thought in terms of maximize, like betting as low as possible when the casino has the advantage, betting as much as we could afford to when we have the advantage. The more you bet, the more EV you can generate if you got the bankroll to back it up. The second thing you need to know is that bigger bet spreads can generate more heat, right? So the more we bet, the more EV we generate, but not all casinos are dummies, and if they see someone using a very large bet spread, they might say, hey, this person might be a card counter. You need to kind of decide for yourself. If your goal is to just maximize EV, then use a big bet spread and make the casinos back you off. That's one of my favorite phrases to think of, is make them back you off. But if you're someone that really wants to minimize heat and back-offs, if your goal is to play as much blackjack as you can without back-offs, then you're going to want to minimize your bet spread. The smaller bet spread you have, the less heat you generally get, but also the less EV you can generate. I think most people fall somewhere in between, which is like, how far can I push my bet spread without too much heat? And, you know, it's kind of subjective, and you never know what a casino is going to do. You and I could walk into the same casino 2 different nights. One of us could get backed off. The other person could last forever. It's kind of hard to tell. But if you want to try to find that balance, you know, that's up to you to try to figure out. I've been on different teams that had different goals. Most of the teams I've been on, the goal has been get the money, make them back us off, and we'll deal with the consequences of back-offs later, because at least we got their money when we could. One other kind of minor thing is that there's not really ever a reason to keep raising your betting beyond a true 6. I've rarely, if ever, found a bet spread that you would want to keep increasing your bets beyond a true 6, because at that point, the reward versus the risk is that point where your top bet should already be out there. So if you look at the predetermined bet spreads we have in our bankroll management app, you'll see that if they don't stop at a true 4 or 5, the max bet will be out there by a true 6. Look, the bottom line is that to make more money as a card counter, we bet more when we have the advantage. We bet less when they have the advantage. Beyond that, everything in practice as a card counter is about protecting our risk and getting to the long run. Making sure we're not overbaying our bankroll so that our risk is low, and betting in a way where we can get to the long run, whether that's being aggressive and you get to the long run by moving on to the next casino, or by trying to control how much heat and you know, how aggressive you want to be with your bet spreads so that you can get to the long run by getting more hours in any particular casino. So that gives you a good broad overview of bet spreads and how to think about it. We'll get into more details in future videos.